Today's conspiracy theories, tomorrow's headlines. Most are still asleep and I ain't talking about no bedtime. The truth is not a Google search, you need to get your head right. The Greek goddess of illusion was called Media, and I'm not a coincidence theorist, I look for thread lines. Smashing every deadline, no longer smashing red wine. Though I can hear the bells chime, it feels like the end times. That probably should have been smashed on red wine, but the carnal mind is foolish. Obey and end up ghoulish. Don't get used by instinct, take control and learn to use it. Make a load of earnest music, earn a few quid, learn a few tricks. Sure, the truth is persecuted, this whole world is pure abusive. Know a bit about everything and everything about nothing. Figured out my noggin while you picture out shopping. You sit about watching while I dish it out, stop it. I don't mean to sound cocky, I'm not even proud of it. It's a second itch to me, just to be this out honest. I don't even need to sound honest, never been about profit. Everything but out on it, you can bet your house on it. Doubt I'll be out for the count when the sounds, and I'm down for the beat, no beat down. I mean, how long's it been? Help me out. I've been the only one who's held me down. All in the mind, hell freeze now. Still sick with it, healthy how? Few bars down and the world freaked out. I don't reach out, I seek out to speak out. I'ma recount the reasons they beat out. I am not the way, no way. I have seen the way. Speak, repeat, there's no way.
There is a myth. When the first ships arrived to a specific continent, all but a few indigenous people could see them. The mystics. They were the ones who had deeper relationships with the unknown and unseen. And once they told the other people what they saw, suddenly everyone could see them. And it wasn't that the ships were invisible, they were there. It was the idea that people were unable to perceive what they couldn't understand. We recognize reason, but the more we speak of the subject with grace and dignity and elegance, others too will begin to perceive the extraordinary, and perhaps they too will have a flash of beauty.
Upeha, Tikali, Denahuto. Pray to Creator in the four directions. I've spoken with my ancestors, with our elders, and peoples all across Turtle Island to speak about the beings that have walked this land forever before us. I offer you sage, tobacco, sit here before the fire to speak from the heart about a very important matter, about the unknown, the unseen, and the unbelievable to many. These beings that we're going to speak of, I ask you forgiveness for talking so plainly, talking so openly. I hope that you can find it in yourselves to allow me to speak of these things. I offer you tobacco, napagi, to begin these talks. I am Dan Dotson Ye Takona, Raven and the Wolf Brings Medicine. I'm Koyakana Athabaskan in Muskogee Creek. I'm adopted Lakota by the Oglala family. These beings have been here a lot longer than we have, and they despise us because we have broken the rules, the laws, the universal truths, the spiritual way of being in balance with creation. But they too have a language, a culture, ceremonies. They take care of their own. That's why we can't find them. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be known. They just want to live. In our Koyukon way, we don't openly discuss or talk about these woodsmen, these beings. This world that we live in is both spiritual and physical. Some people like to use the terms interdimensional, but it's all the same thing. They can seamlessly move in between. The way that they live in the world without the ego, without constraints of the language and the understandings and the ego of science, takes us away from that instinctual, primitive way. And they do have ways, from what we understand, to emit maybe ultra low frequencies to stun us so that they can move out of the area. Not far from here, in Mount Hood National Forest, I was out gathering medicines with some people. And two of the people I was with, they were stunted. And I wasn't affected. And I don't know how one was able to move all the way around us as fast as it did, and then the other ones to move away. I grew up hunting, fishing in Alaska. I climbed a lot of mountains and seen a lot of things. But the way these things moved, I knew they were there and I knew they were moving, but I couldn't really see them. There's a lot of language today that people use, like cloaking, like moving in and out of the physical. I think trying to talk about these things that way is a science-based ego thing that just has no business in the world. It's not how the natural world works. And if you try to look at things from that lens, that's all you're going to end up with is bigger questions. If you look at these beings and these things and the world as a spiritual entity, all things are made up of the same things, you'll begin to see the relationships and how things work. These beings have the ability to do things that we aren't able to, mostly because of our ego. So if you trust and believe in the supernatural, I think you'll get a lot further in this world.
I'm a timber cruiser, and I collect timber data, meaning the sizes and the health of the trees. And so we put plots to not go out and count every tree. It was late fall, almost early winter. And as I arrived in this area and I started working, I was into it for about an hour. And then I got into this creek. As I would go around and measure the trees within my plot, something was moving. And I kept looking in that direction and I couldn't see it. And then as I finished up that plot, then that's when it vocalized at me. And bears, cougars, anything that growls in the woods could have made that sound. But what made this different from hearing those sounds was this sound was projected at me, and I felt vibration go through like a wave through my body when this sound was projected at me. And I put my hands up, and my whole body was tingling. And I was like, I'd never felt like this before. And I was like, what is that? Because it did it twice. So I dropped down to the ground where there were no limbs, and it was so dark over there, I couldn't see anything, even on the ground. So I finished up, went to my next plot, and then it did it again as soon as I stopped. I jumped in the truck, I started up, and I hightailed it out of there, and I got out. When I got back to the office, I met up with my other coworkers, and I told them what was going on up there. I says, I need help. I need help finish this up. I don't want to go back in there by myself. They told me about their experiences, different places, and they said, we know what's there, and you can finish that by yourself. We're not going to go out there. So that was my first experience with them.
I served a total of a little over 16 years in the Air Force and the U.S. Army, both. Background in intelligence analysis. The sighting I had in 2018, I actually did not see it first. I had some relatives up here, and they had brought along a couple of friends that were sisters as well. And one of the sisters and I were walking back towards the vehicle. She looked up along the ridge line, and she said, "What's that?" And so I kind of looked up and saw this being walking with no issues at all across some pretty steep and treacherous terrain, about to kind of crest a ridge line. So I ran around to pull out my binoculars, and by the time I looked up, it was gone. It kind of bothered me the whole way home, and then when I got home and shared it, that's what really pulled me in. Even after all the research, I still wasn't ready to admit to what I thought I had seen. And it wasn't until I met a fellow named Joe Hauser and Ron Moorhead. And after talking to them, I kind of had aha moments. It was like, what you've seen. And that's when you kind of realize that it's really okay. You're not out there alone in this belief. There are a lot of people out there that basically went through the same thing. Then you move forward from there. That's when the real questions start. I was familiar with Aristotle's metaphysics, his writings. I think a lot of people, when they think of metaphysics, they think of the supernatural. I don't go at it from that supernatural perspective. I go at it from the perspective of what is, what could be, what might be, based on the knowledge we have, what we learn about it. So why shouldn't we examine all the evidence, all the theories, any hypothesis, anything that supports the possibility or the probability of existence? There's something there that we don't know about. Don't let mainstream science discourage your research, and don't let that be the only reason why you're conducting research. Like Aristotle says, don't believe everything you hear is truth. Be critical, evaluate what you believe in, not what they believe in. The science that we don't understand, paranormal, above normal. The problem is that there's such a stigma associated with that term. Don't limit yourself. Because if you limit yourself metaphysically, then you're not going to see what might be right in front of your nose. You have to have belief in yourself. No matter how difficult it gets, you have to believe in yourself. And there's a saying that the most powerful thing in the universe is a belief.
Daryl and I met at the Cottage Grove lake bed. Daryl wanted to meet a local. He had just moved to town and he didn't really know any locals here that were into such a strange subject or hobby. And so we set up a kind of a date to meet up at his house. And that's when things kind of took off.
When I first moved to the house down here below us, I would hear things at night. It prompted me to look for someone that knew what those sounds might be. We were over the hill here, probably as the crow flies 3 to 5 miles. And we come around the turn and Toby's like, hold it. And in the bank were these giant impressions. Looked like someone took a basketball and just about half of it stamped it right into the soil.
It's rounded and it's got hair striations in it. And you can see there's actual hair within it right there. There's a black hair. Oh, bring your shadow out just a bit there. And then there's hair down in here. So all together, looks like 2 knees, hairy knees, and a long right something, maybe an arm. At an angle like this, and this arm is down in here. And this one, this hand has made that disturbance.
Those knee prints got to be something's knees.
Are those bear prints?
No.
Is there anything bearish about that?
No, because a bear would have claw marks.
Okay.
And if it was
What about a bear's knees or a bear's elbow?
a bear is not gonna lean down on his knees on the side of the road.
Okay.
Besides, he would have touched the top somewhere.
What about an elk?
No.
Clydesdale, moose,
Yeah.
elephant,
None.
Sasquatch.
None of the above. Yeah, maybe something with hairy knees.
Oh wow, that was pretty cool when you were in general.
Yeah, you see that hair? See that hair?
Oh yeah, and then
2, 3,
yeah, you
and
could
see all those
them.
wrinkles?
Yes.
Oh, look at that big one, guys.
Oh my gosh, that's a good one.
Oh,
Hold that one up.
Whoa!
wow.
You see that one?
Oh yeah.
That's good. We excavated a 50-pound plaster cast of what are now known to be knee impressions of an unknown 1,000-pound plus hominid. Then we had them looked at by a Boeing engineer who did the weight displacement. We had the hair tested by a vet. It came back as an unknown hair type.
Then we brought him back to the property and we put him inside that shop. And when we did, that's when everything started happening around there.
As soon as those knees went inside the garage, it was like the gates of Valhalla opened up for a paranormal researcher.
There have been giants in our history. King Gilgamesh had to go into the forest. Well, he did this on his own volition, and he killed the guardian of the forest, who was a big ogre-like, ape-like creature that lived in the forest. The Gilgamesh is one of humanity's oldest written stories on the planet. The Hindus have their army of ape-like creatures that lived in the forest that Krishna called upon. In Genesis in the Bible, they pushed the giants back to a little town called Hebron. They didn't want them living there anymore with the regular humans. There's the story of the Nephilim, who were these beings that were born out of gods into human women, and they created giants. If you look at Egyptian hieroglyphs, they have larger than life humans, and they think because they were just their pharaohs, and so they painted them large. I'm really on the fence about the fact that these things were considered to be stories or metaphor by ancient peoples. That's a stretch to say that what they wrote on their walls wasn't true. I think they're what the indigenous and Native Americans have called them. They're the master of the forest, and that's been my experience of them.
I was born and raised Muslim. The most prominent chapters in the Quran states that God is Lord of the worlds, with a plural. We don't know what that means. We don't have all of the answers, but we know it says worlds, not just world. So part of that faith for us is the unseen world, which we believe in angels and other beings. And then there's one specific verse that says, and he creates that which you do not know. And for us, that is all we need to hear. We believe that God gave us math and science as a way to explain creation to us because we are logical creatures. It's not a competition of God versus science. Our knowledge of the universe and Earth is if you could take the tip of a needle and dip it into the ocean, and the amount of water on that needle is our knowledge and compared to God's knowledge of all the ocean. So we really know nothing.
Well, a lot of people have been raised religiously and will not delve out of that at all. A lot of people have been raised scientifically and think Newtonian physics is all there is. They won't step out of that box. But to me, they can go together. They don't have to be separated like that. I don't think spirituality and quantum physics are that far apart. Nikola Tesla said, what one man calls God, another man calls the laws of physics. I got to say this. People won't say I'm in the woo-woo factor here. Well, okay, put me in the woo-woo factor. That's where Tesla is. That's where Einstein was. I'm happy to be with that group of guys. No problem at all. That's the woo-woo that people are talking about. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Dr. Edgar Mitchell said, there's no natural or supernatural phenomena. There's only gaps in our knowledge of what is normal. We must strive to close those gaps of ignorance.
We are beings both of matter and spirit. And so it is right that we go out into nature and experience physical nature as well as spiritual nature. And when we entrain with the spiritual aspects of nature, then we come into a place of balance, and that's when the gates open. When we're in a place of balance, both intellectual and spiritual, we're able to perceive both realities, visible and invisible. It simply takes walking out into nature. From my perspective, because of my worldview today, when a person has an encounter with the paranormal or the extraordinary, It is an initiation. And I think that everyone at some point in their life gets the invitation. Not everyone RSVPs. Sometimes we push it aside, but it is nature's way of showing us the true reality as it is, because nature is visible. It's an ecosystem, it's complex. But there's an invisible aspect to nature as well, the spiritual aspect, because everything is physical and spiritual. When we have these extraordinary experiences, they're asking us to step onto a path of commencement, of study, and to see the universe as it truly is, both visible and invisible. You could say that is very much like quanta, waves and particles. These experiences are real and unreal, both here and not here, but they exist. At some point, if a Bigfoot crosses your path, I believe there's a reason for it. It's to open you up. Bigfoot is perhaps a gate, your first gate, and there are many gates. The entire paranormal lexicon, each experience or being could be considered a first gate, and once those gates of the gods open, they never close.
When I go into the woods, my intention is always to have an open heart and to have experiences, good experiences, positive experiences. That's what I receive. If you go into the woods fear-based, guaranteed you are going to receive that energy. That's the way it works. That's the way thought works. That's the way consciousness works. As you open up the heart, you are expanding, and energy-wise, you are feeling different frequencies around you. And when you go to the woods and walk in the woods, you start to get in alignment with this energy. And this energy will present itself in different 3D forms at first. You will ask a question and you will receive an answer. One perfect example of that is I had this little epiphany. I'm kind of known for taking a sketchbook out into the woods, and I like to journal and I like to sketch every day. While I was hiking, I was asking, why is it that we get one footprint and that's it? Sometimes you'll just see one footprint of a large nature, of a large something. And I had this epiphany where it wasn't really that they were stepping into 3D and presenting a foot. It was more that I was resonating and actually expanding my own frequency and stepping into a different density. And that presents itself in a different dimension. Immediately I was like, if I could just write this down, I'm gonna forget this thought. If I could just write this down. And within 100 feet, there was a stick on the trail that had a little red sketchbook hanging off of it. And it was empty. This was a completely empty sketchbook. It was brand new, and it was just hanging by this little, just like this, off of the limb, and there was nothing in it, absolutely nothing. It was a brand new, clean little sketchbook. You know, at first I was like, okay. My physical 3D heaviness kind of just said, no, you know, somebody lost that, somebody found it, somebody put it up on the stick. And then I realized, you just asked the question and you got the answer. And this was the answer. And this is the book.
In 2010, I had a drum workshop, and I didn't expect anything to happen other than for people to come together and have a good time and enjoy making a drum. There was a man who came, I'll just call him Richard.
I spent my life in the Sierra Nevadas hunting, fishing, and camping, but never seeing anything really substantial. And then I had an experience with my 15-year-old son. We were night fishing, and I wanted more answers, and people had told me Arla had a lot of activity around her land. So I called her. I said, look, I'll pay the entry fee, but I'm not interested in making any drums. I want to cruise around on your land. She said, I don't have any problem with that. You're welcome to come. And after 2 days of frustration and running around day and night, I was sitting on the tailgate of my pickup and just kind of trying to figure where I wanted to go to from here because I wasn't having much success. And I guess out of frustration, I just started speaking out very loudly in this wooded area by myself. I said, look, I'm just here to see you. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to see you up close. At some point, maybe 30 minutes later, I saw a figure coming out of the tree line.
We were sitting around the fire, and as I do a lot, I just get up and walk off into the woods at night. And that particular night, I had done that.
She made a beeline straight towards me, and as she walked up, I stood up and I said, Arla, how did you know I was here? And she said, they told me you were here. And you got to understand, I'm still a little bit skeptical here, but I'm thinking in my mind, that's a pretty good trick. And she looked at me and she said, do you want to go see them?
This is a man who had been in law enforcement of one kind or another most of his life. He had a good heart, a really good heart. So I told him, I said, come on, let's just go walk in the woods. So we took off to go down to the woods.
It was a little bit of a walk, several hundred yards, and she started calling various names out loud. And it wasn't but just a short period of time, I began to hear heavy footfall movement coming from a creek on the other side of that fence, maybe a couple hundred yards, but I could hear the dry leaves crackling. And then I start hearing more footfall and noise coming from the northeast, and then more from the south, at least 3 different directions, could have been more. And I'm looking for flashlight glimmer, some kind of light source in that near pitch dark. I mean, I'm serious, folks. I was pretty nervous and confused a little bit. I wasn't in my comfort zone. I was kind of casually, subtly looking, but not sure what I would see. And I hear following movement in the brush. Something was paralleling us.
We walked on down to the woods, and he had the experience of his life.
As clear as I'm speaking to you, the words, expression, the thought, very clear, said, why are you carrying a gun? When that came through my head, I kind of freaked out. I'd never had an experience like that. And my thought to myself was, Rick, you're losing it. You're hearing voices in your head. And I tried to ignore it. And whoever was speaking to me knew I was trying to ignore it. And the profound volume or intensity was cranked up 10 times, and the words repeated, why are you carrying a gun? And the second time it went through my head, I knew they're talking to me.
He had told me, I had somebody ask me, what was I doing with a gun in my pocket? And I said, ask you? And he said, yeah, in my mind. And he said, all I knew was I had to tell the truth.
And I said, it's a tool of protection that I carried on my job. I've carried it around my close friends and family. I've never hurt them with it, and I will not hurt you now. And at that point, the voice said, step away from Arlen.
They knew he had a gun. He answered right, and they told him to step away from me. And that's what he did.
There was not an ounce of surprise or expression on her face. She just warmly smiled at me and she said, do what they tell you to do, And I will say that's probably one of the hardest few steps I've ever taken, because she was their friend. I didn't know what I was encountering. It was like I was stepping off the edge of the Grand Canyon or something. I had no idea what was going to happen next. The atmosphere is almost electrically charged. It's almost dizzying, overwhelming. And I just kind of turned and tentatively walked back, and down about 50 feet down the trail, and this tall, hairy shape stepped out from behind the tree, massive shoulders, the classic artist illustration of a Bigfoot, and he stood out looking right at me. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could see the dark recessed, eye portion. There was a 2/3 moon out, but I got a clear look at him. My jaw dropped open. I'm gawking at him because I'd never seen anything like this that close. And then I see movement, and a young female steps out from behind the tree, the same distance on the trail. After that happened, I had a paradigm shift in my thinking. That was probably the most profound, once in a lifetime experience.
It's beyond what you can express in words. When something like that happens, it's, I can't, I can't put it into words. It's just really special.
My name's Tara, and when I realized that I could communicate with the dead, I started doing psychic work and helping other people communicate with loved ones, and also crossing spirits over. And then this last year, I saw a Bigfoot. The first time I saw him with my eyes, and then I've seen him in my head a few times, and I can communicate with him quite regularly up here. We come up into the woods quite a bit because we do clearings up here, and we help ghosts and spirits, and we communicate. And we were up here doing a clearing one day, and we heard a noise, and we looked over, and it wasn't like 20 feet away, and he was standing there, and he's just standing there staring at us. And it scared us because we didn't know there were any here, and we'd never seen one or never even thought they existed, whether they did or they didn't. So it was kind of scary at first, but then we realized that he's just looking at us. He isn't being aggressive. He's not throwing things at us or anything. We talked about it. So we looked at each other, and we looked back. He was gone. Didn't make a noise, nothing. And so we're like, well, crap, they exist. So that was kind of scary, but at the same time really cool because we actually saw him. Then after that, we saw them a couple more times. I can see him in my head, and I saw him and his family, a little one and a medium one and a adult female. I say he because I only communicate with him and his son, which is the little one. I don't communicate with the mother or the teenaged one. There's also a stone that he actually left for me in the shape of his foot, which is kind of cool. One of the first things that he showed me, a Native American sitting on the ground, crisscross, and him or others like him sitting with the Native Americans. And the way that he showed me that they communicated was they would stick their hands on top of the Native Americans' hands, and they were able to transfer energy that way and communicate that way. And they lived with them, and they interacted with them on a regular basis. And it was very prevalent up in this area. It was easy for them to communicate because the Native Americans, they said, were so open to the spiritual world and other dimensions, and they were able to receive the messages very easily like I received them. It was the same type of way. They've told me that they do care about the human race, and it makes them really sad that we're destroying the planet. And they care enough that they actually used to interact with us, and they want to do that again, but they don't trust anyone. And the way that they know they can trust somebody is that the people that they approach, like myself and my partner that I work with, is because we look differently. It's an energy, and they can actually see that energy. So if they see somebody with that energy, they will approach and watch from a distance. And if they know that they can trust them or interact with them telepathically, they can at least get a feel and know if they're going to want to interact with that person. It takes a very long time for them to get up to that, though. They're here because they want to be here, and they're here and they will communicate with people if you have the right intentions and they know it if you do or you don't. But if people are out there trying to hunt them and they're going to be out there destroying the forest and causing problems, you're going to see less and less of them. I would have never imagined that he existed. And then once he did exist, I would never imagine that he would communicate with me because I'm not any different than anybody else. So why me? I don't know. But I think he knows that I'm not out to get him. I'm not out to get evidence, you know, to take pictures and try to get him caught. And he knows that. So I think he's more open to communicate with people who want the same thing as him.
When we brought the knee impressions back to Daryl's house, it was fairly obvious that these were large human-like knee impressions. And I turned to Daryl and I said, listen, it could get really weird now. There's rumors out there, including talking to Native American Mel Scahan, that says if you bring back biologicals from Sasquatch, there's a consequence to this. And these were covered in hair. I was mostly thinking that these knees are going to inspire some kind of response. I had no idea how frequent the responses would come, however mysterious they were.
There's a trail right up here, and it was warm. So Izzy and me went up there, and I was kind of scouting out for hunting, actually. So we went on a little trail between some blackberry bushes, like you see. And we get up in there, and her tongue's hanging out. She's like, so I'm like, dang, I forgot the water. So we just walked up this narrow trail. I mean, you know, with the bushes on each side. There's no entrances or exits anywhere. So we come walking back towards the truck, and here's this old 1970s thermos sitting in the trail. Hair stands up on the back of your neck. You're thinking, is there some weird tweaker out here that did that? But no one in sight. I mean, you could see everywhere on both sides.
I know he's got Sasquatch stuff. We see giant handprints on the door frame, muddy, oily handprints, 3 times the size of your handprints on the door frame, like something's trying to lift up the door frame. We're squeezing 12 feet up on the drain pipes.
We came home from church one day. Here's this rock the size of a softball sitting in the center of our living room. Izzy, she's a little toy Australian Shepherd, upstairs under our bed, scared to death. It could show up at 2 in the afternoon. You could go in the house to get a drink and come back out, and here would be a rock sitting on the hood of your vehicle, or some kind of little child's toy sitting in the gravel. And there's nobody around. I mean, it just makes the hair on your neck stand up because you're thinking there's somebody out here, you know, and it's kind of a little bit scary at first. Then after about 20 times, it's like, well, yeah, here's 3 rocks sitting on the deck in the morning. You know, it's just me and my wife and our little dog. Her mind tries to debunk everything I did. And then all of a sudden, you know, all these kids' toys are showing up and all this other stuff out in the middle of nowhere.
This activity seemed to coalesce right here within and around this shop. That's why you see ornamentation over here on the side. A lot of things would happen right on the panel of the shop wall. All of these things have age and wear on them, like they've been found and then kept somewhere, like there's a Bigfoot Goodwill, you know, down in the middle of the earth. And Daryl, you can attest to most of this weirdness because you'd wake up to it just like I would.
Every morning it was a new day around here. Things would change and you never knew what was going to show up.
What was like some of the phenomena that you had experienced?
Different gifts constantly. Random out of the blue things that who knows where you could even come. I mean, we're out in the middle of nowhere here. So how can you come up with a child's toy or just different things?
It coalesced with things you talked about. These were objects that were significant. I would have trouble with my cell phone. I would say, I think I need to get a new cell phone. My boat was parked here, and underneath the oar, kind of hidden, was this muddy cell phone. It's an old Sidekick phone that I don't even think they make anymore, right? Where, you know, you type here. I would say a good 25% of the items had to do with something you talked about, including that glass heart.
Well, my wife had open heart surgery a few months prior. When we got here, you know, we put out bird feeders, and she put up a hummingbird feeder in the back, new one there. And probably about a week later, and she still had ongoing, doctor visits for her heart and things. So about a week later, she comes out to check her, maybe put some more stuff in her feeder. And here, propped up against a tree directly below that, was a glass heart. And we'd been talking in the house and stuff about her heart thing and how everything was progressing, and it was just strange.
The phenomena can be so personal. I was telling you this story about how these rocks came to me. I had this, it's tiger iron, it's a heart, and I left it at a gifting site, and then I retrieved it because nothing seemed to happen. And so when I retrieved it, I brought it home. I woke up the next morning, and of course, this was on my doorstep. They're identical in size. And then just recently, I lost my cats. They passed away, and it's been a very hard thing for me. And my neighbor, which is so strange, she didn't know about these rocks. She got out of her car, it was sitting by her car, and she just knew. She's like, oh, that's for Sonia. Her heart's hurting. I should give that to her. And then when she turned it over, and of course she saw the cat, right? She saw this cat. She's like, that's definitely for Sonia. And then today we were doing an interview, and Brett happened to see this on the ground right where we were standing. It's a black cat, and one of my cats that passed away is black. I feel that once you engage the phenomena, it never really goes away.
As far as what I think overall is happening, why they would gift in general, I think it's just to move into some kind of relationships, and this is a part of some kind of initiation. Daryl and I both agree that the origins of the activity seem to be coming from the tree line behind his property, and if we're ever going to get to the bottom of this, we're going to have to leave the confines of his house and go into the forest. Daryl found a spot I would come to nickname the Al Moon, or the Al Moon Lab. We called it that because the night that we cast the knee impressions, there happened to be a full moon that was rising, known as the Al Moon. Right after COVID happened, I came down here around, I believe, the 1st of April. And so it was a day like this, and I just stepped out of my Jeep and I said, listen, guys, we're in a lot of trouble. I know you're here somewhere listening, however you're doing this. And I said, I think we need to meet because we're in a world of hurt and we need help. Can you help us? Can you get us some kind of treatment or cure? I spelled "can we meet" out on these little blocks that I have on this altar stump down in the woods. And a couple weeks went by, I went back to Washington, and Daryl shows up, and the blocks had all been rearranged on top of the stump.
Okay, I got down in here where your blocks were. I know we wrote "can we meet" the other day, and now it looks like it's all, there's like a T with some little things on top, like a toe pie or something like that.
It was almost phonetically my name, right? Toby.
One of the blocks got moved down to here. Looks like there's something black on your little rock, and your blue rock is out. Oh. Ooh, I don't know what that is. It's nasty.
So we had it looked at by a mycologist. It is called black witch's butter. It is a cure for upper respiratory disease. And if ingested, it is a way for you to meet the land spirits. What are the chances, right?
In the beginning, I was coming from a mindset of a law enforcement officer, a detective, a cop, and the fact that I knew that Bigfoots were real because I had seen one. I was a full believer in the fact that these things were either an ape or some sort of a relic hominid, and they were just really rare. And that's why they had existed mostly undetected up to this point. This whole body of knowledge that I'm building, there happens to be a lot of glaring things that I can't deny. And being a law enforcement officer and a detective, I have to consider all the evidence. Even though that I'm a black and white, type thinker at this point, and I'm not really considering anything paranormal, I'm having to consider my own experiences at this point and that of other people's experiences that I have talked to. And I'm starting to account for a lot more of the strange evidence because I'm talking to witnesses, and some of these people are telling me this stuff that's consistent among them, paranormal type stuff like mind speak or other weird stuff. A guy told me that he watched one cloaked one day, and he described it to me just like the movie Predator. It's like he could see it, but he couldn't see it at the same time. You could see the form of it, but it was standing there. And I had heard that many more times too throughout my research, and I had read reports online that claimed the same thing, and the people describe it just like the movie Predator.
I'd love to invite you to walk me through this, really organically. I find this so interesting. If you want to see my reaction to this on a first-time basis, you have one opportunity to see my first response. I see something moving. It almost looked like plant material falling down. Okay, so what did I just see here? Oh my goodness.
Wow. Pretty cool.
Yeah, so something had to have hit it really hard and really fast right in the middle to break it there, to not break these smaller pieces that are supporting it at either end.
Yeah, that had to have been,
Yeah,
like a thrust and not a hang, you know what
yeah,
I'm saying? 'Cause if
something
if
hard
it'll
and
hung on it
fast.
for any amount of time,
What the heck was that? Did you see that?
Sam's been checking it out.
What the heck is it? There's something taking off right there. Did you see that?
Yeah.
I was standing right here when it happened. This wasn't here then. This has since fallen. We were discussing this log right there. I looked right straight through across from over here, and I saw this black head pop up. He was about so high, triangular shape. There was no neck. He was solid black. He turned and ran that way. He was all arms and legs and hair. And my friend Sam was right here. I saw the tree here blocked the view for me for a second, and then I saw him just a little bit more there, and then Sam turned and stepped and blocked my view. And at that point, we thought maybe he had crossed the trail and the people on the trail were gonna get the sighting. But they never saw him. The next day we came back, and you could see where his tracks went right down into a hole in this debris pile from when they logged back here years ago.
What I'm looking at is in the region where this movement, this vertically downward movement is taking place. I'm looking to see whether there are any effects on the stuff in the foreground, right? You know how there's that hanging, that brown branch. And so that's the first place my attention is drawn, is to see whether the stuff in the foreground is somehow drawn into the effect. And I don't see that.
You get older and you move off to the woods and you start looking, but you don't really think anything is there around you because you've been raised to think that they're not real. And then one day you discover that all of the things that you've been thinking about all those years really do exist. They're really out there, and they're not that far away from you. What I saw was the black head popped up and ran. What the camera picked up looks like something from a Predator movie. And I was pretty shocked by that. We had to put it on a bigger screen to get a bigger look. And at that point I realized, okay, this is something that my camera can't do. That was really life altering for me, because up until that point, I didn't believe in the woo, not like I do now. I had seen Sasquatch vanish into thin air, and I had rationalized it. I had seen vegetation being mowed over by something that wasn't there, and I rationalized it. And until I had the cloaker on video where I could look at it and go, I saw this, I know what this was, and this is what the camera captured. Now I believe. Now I get it. I now know that this happens. But when you're actually walking on the trail and trying to convince yourself that there could be an invisible being standing 6 feet from you, it's really difficult to get that mindset and think in that mindset. And I struggled with that for a long time. You know, even now, you know, when things happen, your mind wants to rationalize and go with the things that you were raised to believe are normal. When you sit back and you analyze it and think about what happened, the things that surround this experience gives you lessons, you know? It's not just that Sasquatch exists, it's that Sasquatch can do this and this and this. Oh wait, and he can do this too. Huh, that kind of thing.
I could just sit here and scrub this back and forth for an hour. This thing that you've shown me here on this tablet is kind of troubling and interesting at the same time. I haven't seen anything like this in the context of Bigfoot, because this implies things to me that go far beyond some hairy creature skulking around in the woods. At this point, I no longer look at the Bigfoot image as being the primary, certainly not the exclusive way that whatever this thing is can manifest. And so, you know, it makes me think of the Bigfoot image as being almost an arbitrary avatar for something else.
If you look at the phenomena that people out in the field have reported around Bigfoot, I'm not talking about the academic people. I'm talking about the people who've been out there in the fields with the Bigfoot. What they report experiencing and sensing is very similar to what people report who experiment with coherent matter. There's some of the same phenomena going on. I think it's really reasonable just to suggest that these could be overlapping phenomena. All of these phenomena that we call paranormal, some underlying symptoms here that we always see: sudden temperature changes, strange smells, strange effects on batteries, cameras going out, electronic equipment acting in really strange ways. I think if you can base some of this in science, it allows us to have the grasp of what's going on, and it allows us to stop calling it supernatural and paranormal, which I'm not against. But let's say what we're calling supernatural and paranormal is basically another type of physics that we're not familiar with. In our day-to-day experience, we perceive things that are either solid or liquid or gaseous, like the atmosphere. And we're also aware of other states of matter, like plasmas, which is the next state of matter, which is ionized gases. And we see those in fluorescent light bulbs and in lightning. But there's a fifth state of matter beyond plasmas. And that's when the matter gives up its individual identity and becomes a quantum coherent structure. And all the particles now are at the same temperature and the same frequency. When they do this, they can change states and do things that ordinary matter can't. For instance, the ordinary matter that we're used to just can't become invisible like that. The chair is not going to disappear, but coherent matter can work in ways that ordinary matter can't because it's based on quantum principles. So it can easily go into what's called a cloaked mode. And the reason we know this is true is because people who've worked in the CIA have come forward to talk about this. We know the Department of Defense monitors the US for all sorts of abnormal, out of the ordinary types of matter and energetic properties that would maybe indicate that there's been some sort of attack on the US or something that gives them an indication that something's off. So that's a type of matter where it's beyond our ordinary sensory ability for you and I to see, but with the special equipment, you can pick it up, you can detect it. You sort of have to wonder whether there's other types of life out there that's already, using those states of matter, that's sort of interacting with those states of matter, maybe even based in those states of matter that's already indigenous to the Earth. And that's how you kind of get into this discussion of dark matter relic neutrinos. The relic neutrinos are something that's really interesting that we've only learned about recently. Those are the original radiation from the cosmic background from the time of the Big Bang. These are particles that decoupled from the rest of the universe, we're told, 1 second after the Big Bang. And they're still radiating down on the Earth because they're coming from the far edges of the cosmos. Why relic neutrinos matter to us is their wavelength is big enough to interact all the way up from the subatomic to cells. We're interacting all the time with energy that's coming from space that's invisible, but has a slight energetic effect. And scientists generally agree it's a small component of what we call dark matter. The reason that dark matter is so important is all of these models of cosmology that we have, the so-called double dark model, is dark energy and dark matter. These models say that there has to be another type of matter out there that we can't interact with directly, but we interact with gravitationally. And that there's something like 10 particles of dark matter for every particle of regular matter that we see. So if you look around the room, you look around the Earth, you look around the universe, you think you see what's going on, there's 10 times as much matter that you don't see. That means that we're interacting with something all the time. It's probably absolutely critical to biological life to have this energy source from relic neutrinos. There's actually more to it than that, because we emit the same wavelengths, again, from our body, from biological interactions. This has been referred to as chi energy. The reason this all matters is because this gives us a particle that can drive cold fusion reaction. And initially, when we heard about cold fusion from Fleischmann and Pons in '89, the theory was not developed enough. There were people working on it. It goes back quite a ways, but we didn't hear about it. It's highly likely that there are life forms out there right now that are already using this and getting all of the benefits of coherent matter that our own defense contractors are filing patent applications for. I mean, if you have companies like Lockheed Martin and others filing patent applications for coherent matter, and they're telling you, okay, it's going to allow us to cloak, we're going to have teleportation, we're going to be able to influence things at a distance, we're going to use this for directed energy weapons, and it's in this patent that the patent office takes 10 years to approve for Lockheed Martin. It's approved in March 2021. If they're getting patents in coherent matter, I guarantee you there's other life forms out there that already know how to do this, and they're using cloaking, they're using teleportation, and all the other sorts of really interesting quantum effects that have an evolutionary advantage in survival with other life forms, other organisms, the ecosystem that you're a part of. And the reason you would expect that, it's very simple. Nature doesn't waste anything. We know from every single thing we've ever looked at that nature doesn't waste any energy. It recycles everything that it can, in our bodies, in any biological system for maximum efficiency, right? On one hand, they've been telling us, oh, cold fusion, that's not real. That's a fantasy, it's junk science, but we want a patent in it. You can't have it both ways. So I think we can see what's going on here. There's a level of science, maybe it's classified, maybe it's not, that has to do with creating other states of matter. Ball lightning is something that's been of interest for a long time to humanity. It's been seen for hundreds and thousands of years, and it's been seen in natural circumstances. It's seen around thunderstorms. Before an earthquake, you would get ball lightning, orbs, and various anomalous light phenomena. Sometimes it just shows up. It can follow you around, and you feel like something is following you around. It almost seems like a living object, but you can also create it in the lab.
Up here in the Pacific Northwest, in the area that we're living, there's just a lot of stuff going on. And I was experiencing these things and then actively researching, learning as much as I could. I found that going out into the field was the best thing to do, having those personal experiences. And what I found was that, yes, there are UFOs, there's unidentified things. Yes, there are Sasquatch in the forest. And they're being seen not just by me, not just by the group of people that I'm with, but by many people. And it's not just here, but it's all over. After moving to Portland 2010, I was very engrossed with doing my own research. I've accumulated hundreds, if not thousands, of photos of orbs and also videos of them as well. I didn't know that there was a connection to orbs and Sasquatch. And I started learning from other people who had Sasquatch encounters, experiences, that orbs were a part of that. So I'm going, okay, I'm catching these orbs inside my house. I'm catching them out in fields. I'm getting them everywhere. What are they? I don't know what they are, but there is a connection and they are happening and people are seeing them. People are filming them. People are having experiences with them. And from my own personal experience, this has happened on more than one occasion, that there has to be some sort of telepathic connection between the orbs and us, because they are responding to our thoughts. Recently, I did a camp out. It was at night. I was all alone, and I'm standing there, and I see this massive orb of light. And the light that comes off of these orbs, it's unnatural. It is a light that I have never been exposed to before, except for by them. It is brilliant. It's electric. There's movement within the orb as it's moving, but they are also silent. There's no noise associated with them. And so on this particular sighting, this orb just underneath the tree top level and just slightly inside the trees. And my first instinct when I saw it was, you're so beautiful. You're so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to connect with you. And as I was thinking this, the orb started coming down the road. And it's getting closer to me. It's coming towards me. I was getting a little anxiety on the fact that this was moving towards me. When I felt that way, it stopped. And then it retreated back to its original trajectory, its original spot, and it continued along its path. And then I watched it descend down to the ground. Is this a form of travel? Is that what's happening with the Sasquatch? Are they able to create an orb outside of themselves? Are they able to travel in an orb form? Is it something else and they're just in cahoots? Like they're in cahoots with what's happening in the sky? I'm not sure. I've always had the mindset that at least during and after these experiences, after I've had all these experiences, we say that there's magic in this world and that there's magical aspects. But at this point, no, this whole place is magical.
The way nature does it with cold fusion reactors is it creates its own natural magnetic confinement. system at a small scale. And that pressure, that nucleonic pressure, creates the cold fusion reaction. And this is from the work of Takeaki Matsumoto in Japan, who worked on this since the 90s. So Matsumoto realized that cold fusion was actually tiny ball lightning. That it was actually the same phenomena, which, I mean, it's kind of astounding. What Matsumoto is able to do is say, you know, these aren't all different phenomena. It's not all that. This is all the same thing. It's a type of gravitational collapse caused by electromagnetic energy. And I think you can see why this is classified now, because it creates anti-gravity. It's no wonder that some of these ball lightning studies from the Air Force are so heavily redacted.
Interesting. I just saw another one of those tiny little flashes. Write this down. 1420, take 3.
You know, we've tried what a lot of you guys have done, like leaving them food or gifts, trying to communicate in symbols, things like that, and they've responded some of the time as well with that. And then,
Did you all just hear that? Oh.
some of the time as well with that, and then some of the time as well with that, and then.
The vast majority of the universe is made of invisible matter. You would expect there to be invisible life forms out there too that are using this matter. I mean, if it's already here and it's interacting with us only in the most subtle ways, you would expect life forms that are based on that dark matter. Isn't that what biology tells us, is that ever since Darwin, that things are just constantly evolving and that they're exploiting small advantages, and there's these random genetic mutation, and that the life forms that survive are the ones that have a evolutionary advantage versus the other life forms, and this is how we evolve. We've been told this by science ever since you and I were little kids. Orb phenomena and the balls of light are so intrinsically connected to Sasquatch and Bigfoot. I think what's going on here is you're dealing with a fundamentally similar level of matter, where you have a type of life, a creature that has learned to interact with different frequencies of nature that we don't know how to do. Maybe we forgot how to do it, where the ball lightning emerges from, that it can actually tap into this as an energy form, or either transform into a state where it's interacting with this coherent matter that gives it these properties that we see, the sense of time loss, time space changes, and it's ultimately powered by dark matter. I realize these are a lot of far out concepts. They could seem really strange, but if you look at the connections between them, what we know from 30, 40 years of science, it all sort of makes sense. What we could be dealing with here are literally parallel realities, and what the energy that allows, I mean, how would you shift into a parallel reality? Well, ball lightning is a good place to start. A lot of energy there. That energy may thrust you into a parallel reality temporarily, whether you wanted to go there or not. You just happen to be in that spot on the earth where there's a lot of crystals or, you know, elements that are conducive to charge clusters, and boom, you go through that, and you're now encountering other realities that maybe you wanted to encounter, maybe you didn't, but there they are.
There's things that I won't tell you, that I can't tell you. All I can tell you right now is what goes on in these woods. And I'll look you right in the eye, I'll tell you, whatever goes on in these woods, don't take it for what you can see, because there's a lot more to what you can't see. They're here, they're real. They're not the big monster that everybody seems to want them to be. But there's some that have been messed with by humans that ain't gonna tolerate that. So you're gonna come across some that are grouchy. I'll tell you that right now, but they're real, they're here, and they're next door to you. You have no idea how close they are. That's what I can tell you. Well, we had these trees behind our house, and this is the part of it that's, I guess, the supernatural part. Well, them started watching the wind blowing those trees, and those trees were dancing sometimes. And we were afraid we were going to wake up some night dead because the trees fell on the house. So we took the gamble and we cut the trees down, all three of them. Then, immediately after that, things started happening like, oh, I'd be sitting next to my dog Orc, laying on the bed, right next to the wall, and bam, 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 run outside and there'd be nothing. After we cut the trees down, we had this deer. This deer was bigger, lighter, and it would be right around the house. The other deer, they would be out in the field eating around, but this particular deer would be by the house. Every one of our family members noticed that deer. We had family chats about it. What a weird deer that was, how big it was, how much different colored it was, and how it acted different. I had a bedroom in the front of the house, and I was adjusting my blinds on the window there, and wow, my yard went right up to the woods, and I saw a bear between two trees. Well, I slid the window open to shoo him away because he's too close to the house, and it stood up. Not a bear. It was it. It was him. He stood up. He was tall, hairy, and all of a sudden, this is the thing that got me. That Bigfoot, skookum, Sasquatch, whatever they want to call it, shape-shifted, folks, into the white deer. Just that quick. And it walked away, and it looked over its shoulders, and it looked at me like, okay. They shapeshift. I don't care what anybody says. They shapeshift. They did it right in front of my eyes. After that, for 2 weeks, I had this thing talking to my mind. At that time, I was trying to deny that it was a Bigfoot or whatever, mind speaking me. But for 2 weeks, this went on, and I'd go out to the woodshed, get wood, and I'd tell it, no, I'm not coming out. I'm not dealing with this. Well, one day I went out to the woodshed. I had no phone, no camera, no gun, no nothing. I went out to get kindling. And this persistent mind speak was just rattling me that day. So that day I said, okay, I'm coming out, but I'm gonna be the nastiest thing you've ever eaten, and I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight hard, but I'm gonna come out. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't. And I was very careful. I walked out there very quietly, very careful, and there was a certain place in our property that I knew where it was, and it knew where it was, what I was talking about. It was a little corner out there. When I got to the corner, I heard something, and I turned and I looked, and that cream-colored deer was standing 10 feet from me. I could have stepped over and touched it. It was looking at me, just looking at me. Boy, I started telling it how I wanted to coexist. I mean, I was telling it how I wanted to coexist, how I thought it was cool to be here with it. I didn't know what to expect. But I was telling all kinds of how I liked being in coexistence, and I didn't want to hurt it, and I didn't want to hurt my family, and I just really don't remember exactly what I was telling it. But that was the flavor of what I was trying to mind speak, with it. I don't know how long this took, but it looked at me, I looked at it, and we knew it was over between the two of us. It went its way, and I went my way. I never saw that deer after that. This is my philosophy about the thing. We see a deer, we can relate to that. We see a Bigfoot hanging around our house, we're not going to like that. We're not going to understand that. So this was in a deer form, looking our house over, looking our family over, looking us over to see if we were worthy. That's what I think. And when we had our little party out there in the corner, it was telling me that we were going to be okay.
Some of these interesting effects that people report around Bigfoot, they have a lot of parallels to what you would expect with something that would change its state of matter, a non-ordinary type of matter. Some of those include the eye glow that people report. You know, you've heard interviews with people, and so you think, is it reflected light? But when you hear these descriptions from witnesses, it's pretty clear that on completely dark nights, they're seeing glowing eyes that blink in the bushes we're not usually capable of, that we don't understand very well. I mean, you're talking about self-luminous objects that, create light or generating energy. This is sort of a dull glow that seems to me very consistent with the type of light that we get from orbs. Something that would be consistent with coherent matter is it's literally generating its own gravitational field. This is exactly what Hal Puthoff told us about his research into UFOs from the OSAP program run by the Department of Defense. They were able to determine that some of these craft literally change the permittivity and the permeability of space-time, which changes the speed of light and all sorts of other constants that we're used to being, constants in our reality. The Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and other cryptids seem to be able to do this too. It's not because they're literally a UFO. They're using the same fundamental principles of nature to change these things that for us seem like constants. For them, they're variables. And once this magnetic and electrical capacitance are variables, now you're gliding, you're sliding, you're creating your own gravitational field in a way that is useful to your motility. I mean, when you listen to these descriptions of the way these Bigfoot move over areas with stumps and rocks, and people go back to the next day and they say, we could barely walk up it. And this thing was running like an Olympic sprinter following our car in an area of the forest that was full of debris. How do you get those speeds from something that's supposed to weigh 600, 800, 1,000 pounds? How do you move like a jet? It can't be ordinary matter that does that.
As I'm coming up to the power lines, I slow my truck way down, roll down the window on the passenger side. Just as I can see between the trees a little bit, I see this black thing. It looked like it was almost flying. It was running so fast. I snapped one picture and then it was gone down in a ravine. And it doesn't run like a man or an animal, really. It almost looks like it just skips a beat when it runs.
And then you have their ability to morph. Now, I haven't been able to decide, is this because they're able to actually act like a bush or a tree or a boulder? Maybe they're not the magicians we think they are in every aspect, but they're operating at a certain resonant frequency where you have other phenomena operating. And this would also explain why you see them around UFOs and other, unidentifiable objects in the sky. What could create, a type of biological material that can become invisible like that, or is visible to the eye but not to a camera or something? We have examples of like the cuttlefish and octopus called chromophores. So it's not a total stretch of the imagination that there's other life forms on land that could do something like that. So we don't have enough evidence to know exactly what these Bigfoot are doing, but they seem to either be able to locate, bilocate to another location really quickly so that they literally vanish in front of you, or they seem to be able to shift to another frequency. In my view, what paranormal is you have dark matter plus charge clusters, compressed charge clusters equals all sorts of really interesting stuff.
While we may be getting closer to at least having protocols, methodologies, and standardizations on how to find out whatever some of these things are, I'm not so sure that we'll ever know exactly what some of it is, because some of it just seems so strange and bizarre, and we don't really have a knowledge base to study that. Since the Renaissance, anything spiritual or conscious or metaphysical has been separated from science. And so there's been no scientific training for this particular type of topic. Even if we broaden our minds to realize that science isn't just in the box of mechanical cause and effect, your consciousness is part of the universe. And that's something that we should be studying. What is the physics, the science behind there being a consciousness? And many people have had, if you want to call them paranormal experiences, they've had near-death things, they've had religious experiences. All that's within the universe. And you know what physics is? It's the study of all of the mechanisms that make up the universe. So to put something like that in a box and say you can't study that because it's fringe is just wrong, and it's just bad thinking. One of the things that this is doing for us is beginning to chip away at the stone a little bit, that it is okay to be a scientist studying things that for a long time people have thought were the weird ooga booga things you don't study. And if in the process of studying these things, we learn one new piece of science, one new piece of math, one new piece of physics, one new piece of anything, then that's better than we were before.
There it is, the infamous red dirt.
Yeah, like Oklahoma dirt. The red soil.
Daryl and Cindy, who were already accustomed to moving, decided to move yet again, this time out of state to Oklahoma. Our time at the Almoon Wilderness was coming to an end.
I see some strange stick structure thing over there right behind you also. Where were all those white ones we
Right
saw?
here, see them?
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's been so long since we've been in here.
But this is the first place that we gifted back too. This is where we would stick apples, you know. We'd come all the way up here and leave bags of popcorn and apples up here, and nothing ever happened. I mean, we never got any results. That's it, man. The last one.
Yeah.
That's a wrap as far as the Almoon Lab. And Daryl, I don't know about me, but I don't feel like it'll happen in this spot.
Yeah, it's been a while. What, 3 years?
Yeah.
Coming up here a lot.
We've even found barefoot tracks in the gravel here before, which is quite a thing to see.
Crossing the road, yeah.
It feels done. Doesn't it feel done to you?
Yeah, it feels like
you're ready. You're already.
Feels like they moved on.
Yeah. You've moved on. They've moved on.
Yeah.
It's time for me to move on. Move on.
Move on down the road. With our getting settled in, I'll be going down to Honubby and those areas, especially down, you know, the Kiamishi Mountain Range, which rolls over into Arkansas, where Boggy Creek is and all that. They've had Bigfoot sightings in there forever, a couple hundred years. And doing some squatching with my brother. He knows a lot of areas down there. So we're gonna go camping and see what we can steer up.
I think about it every day. I think about what happened every day. And I try to rationalize it in my mind that it could have been something else, but it wasn't. And you know what? I'm really happy that Cody saw it too, because if he wouldn't have saw this thing, what it did, I'd be still second guessing myself today.
There's an electrical pole that carries power throughout the houses out here. It was right next to the pole where you could look at the pole and see where the top of that figure was before it had started to condense and become a different object.
It was November 2nd, 10:15 in the morning when we actually had the sighting. It was just like any other morning, except it was a little bit later, and he was driving. The sun was at our back, so we have a very good vision of it because the sun was coming right down on it. And as soon as we came around the corner, I noticed what I had thought was a elk standing on its back legs right on the corner, right on the edge of the pavement, looking a side view of it, looking towards the bushes. That's what I thought I saw at that second. I said, Cody, there's something in the road. As soon as he looked up, we both spotted it. And by the time I just told Cody that and looked back, it was already a giant, all I can say is ape man, maybe 9 to 10 feet tall. And how I know that too is, as we were getting closer, I looked at that yellow marker going up that cable, and it was far above that cable standing right here. And that's when we were both just amazed looking at it. We weren't even talking to each other at that point. We were just staring with amazement, getting closer and closer. Now we're between this turn right here and halfway between that turn. We're talking less than 35 yards away. And it starts shrinking down. As what I saw was it shrinking down. It just got smaller, smaller, until it was an orangutan size, what looked to me like an orangutan in a fetal position. What did it look like to you, Cody?
It looked like it had just hunched over and turned a very bright orange.
At that point, it turned into a sphere. This all happened from right there to here. It turned into a sphere of orange, the brightest orange you've ever seen, round, globe-like, levitated off the ground. At that point, after it levitated, it turned into a geometric square, a perfect geometric square, still burning like the sun. It looked like the sun.
And when this thing hunched over, it was so tall that its waist had to at least been here. This is where you would call the midsection, at least, of the beast. And the rest of it was up there. The top of it came down to the waist section like this. And as soon as this part came down to here, whatever was touching the ground came up off the ground just high enough to clear those bushes in a straight line that you could just go whoosh. And that's where that flash of light came from that it just left.
Our eyes couldn't keep up with how fast it was going, so it looked like a streak.
I decided to go to Coquille Point to do a painting there. And I was painting, and Cody and Harold came up, and he asked how much for the painting, because I was almost done with it. And he said, I'll buy it. So he called me about 2 weeks later to pick up the painting. And he told me, if I describe something to you, you think you'd be able to paint it. And then he proceeded to tell me about the sighting. And it was pretty wild. And I told him, you got the right guy, because I'm a Bigfoot enthusiast, but I've never seen one.
I already had the thought in my mind of having this painted, so I'd have something to show people, because a painting's worth 1,000 words. So I started talking to him about it, and boy, we hit it off great.
You know, I wasn't surprised for some reason, because I've heard some wild stories, and I've never had an encounter like that, but I had been listening to Sasquatch Chronicles, and a lot of the stories involved some supernatural things with Sasquatch sightings. I was thinking, wow, that's amazing, like you might have a piece of the puzzle here, that explains a lot of the elusiveness and, why they can't find a body. These guys might not be, physical.
He came out to the site where we actually saw what we saw. He took pictures, interviewed both of us, wrote down everything we said, and then started working on this painting. And we haven't seen the painting at this point finished yet.
There's a lot of stuff that we don't know. We don't know everything. There's a lot of mysteries in this world, and you should keep your mind open to all the possibilities out there. It's a mysterious world, and it's amazing.
The first thing I did was I got down on my hands and knees and looked for hair, because this thing changed 3 different colors, and you would think it would have to drop a hair doing that. It would lose something doing that. And I got down and looked on my hands and knees and couldn't find one hair. And that's when we both looked at each other and said, you know what, I think we better get out of here. We'll come back later. And we did go back later, and we looked for tracks. There was nothing.
I have my hopes that one day that it might reappear back in this spot, but the odds of that happening, as with every other encounter, once you've seen it somewhere, you're never gonna see it in that same spot. So it is quite amazing, actually, that we were able to time everything just right, that we had the best view of this Bigfoot type creature doing all of its transformation right in front of us. It was able to do things that you couldn't even imagine. I've kept it to my mental image of what it was that I saw. I'm trying to just keep it locked in there, because I know that if I just keep it in my head and use that as my frame of reference, I'll never forget what it was that had actually appeared before us that day.
Once you see something, no matter how hardcore you are on not believing something, I'd rather believe my eyes than what I was taught in a book. For about a week after that, at night, I didn't even sleep too good, to tell you the truth, because I was thinking about it all the time. Even at work, I was thinking about it, you know, in my mind, did I see that? Because you keep seeing it over and over. When you see something that you've never seen before, you keep seeing it over and over. What are the chances of us seeing something like that? That's what I always think about. 1 billion to 1, 2 billion to 1. Why us? It could have very easily just jumped off the road, but instead it stayed there and let us, as we're getting closer and closer, it let us see it do all these changes. I will never forget it. It's plastered in my mind. If you would have had that experience, you would never forget it either.
People say, well, you're not offering me any proof with what you're telling me. And I've told people across the United States, into Canada, anytime I've ever been speaking or been at a gathering or whatever, you don't have to believe anything I say. You really don't. I'm not trying to prove anything to you. But I would ask you to file it away. Just put it back somewhere. And then if you have an encounter, or you have somebody that you know and trust has an encounter, then you can go back to that and say, wait a minute, I heard this. So don't throw it away, just file it away.
There's things in this world, Lord, I wish I could explain. Like those senseless killings, our obsession with death and pain. But I've seen another world, and it's waiting for you and me. With light so bright it'll burn your eyes if you try to see. Life is strange and it has a way of showing you what you don't know. Like how can an extinct ape make footprints in the Himalayan snow? Did Enoch really see a spinning wheel on fire in the sky? Or was it an ancient astronaut just going out for his midnight ride? Well, the grays are among us, and the truth is out there, you know. Did our technology come from a weather balloon that crashed out in New Mexico? Well, it's a shame the unexplained is to blame when you're scared at night. Our dreams and mind travel through space and time at the speed of light. This life gives us hope, but it leaves us with a lot of question marks. Was Prometheus' plight to steal the light, just to leave us all in the dark? Well, I've seen a shapeshifter and a coyote trickster posing in a Polaroid picture, which proved to me there was more to life than what we see. Was Newton dropping LSD underneath the apple tree when he discovered a headache and the laws of gravity? Well, I felt the presence of God in the bottom of my bottle of wine. He said secrets will be revealed when we catch up in our place and time. Still then, it's chemtrails and fairy tales.
It's not paranormal, it's normal. It's our view of the world that's subnormal, that's making it seem weird. We're the ones that have to rise up to, understand it. This is reality. It's normal. What's subnormal is our educational system and all these organizations that are dumbing us down. That's subnormal.